Good afternoon. My name is Orlo Steele, and we are here at the Empire Mine. Today's date is March the 10th in the year 2007. I, along with Mr. Phelan, both worked here at the Empire Mine, and we're going to be talking about our experiences at the Empire. The Empire Mine, by the way, started essentially in 1850, and they mined up until 1956, so 106 years of almost continuous operations. In its heyday, it became the richest gold mine here in the state of California and the third richest in the United States, surpassed really only by the Homestake Mine in the Black Hills of South Dakota and then Cripple Creek in Colorado. But the Empire Mine was the richest here in California. Under the management for a good many years, from 1869 up until 1929, William Bourne Sr. and then his son Jr., until they sold it to the Newmont Mining Company in 1929. And the Newmont Mining Company continued to mine up until 1956, when the mine was shut down, not because they had run out of gold, but because the price of gold at the time was still artificially set at $35 an ounce, and they just couldn't produce gold with that ceiling. So the miners had called for an increase in wages, and the mine owners or mine management said, if you do, we're going to have to shut it down. The miners did strike for higher wages, and Newmont Mining Company did, in fact, close the operation. In 1975, mainly through the urgings of a number of local people, the state took over this property and has created one of their historic state parks, and so it's been a park since 1975. Interestingly, the park has all of the surface rights, but the Newmont Mining Company still does have the mining rights here at the Empire.
Thank you very much. Now we'll move it to Mr. Phelan. Mr. Phelan, introduce yourself and then let us know where you worked.
Yeah, I'm John Phelan. I worked at a Central Mine, Old North Star Mine, the Lava Cap Mine.
And the North Star was part of the Empire, was it not?
Yeah, part of Newmont.
And in what capacity did you work in the North Star? Did you work as a miner?
Yes, Yeah, I did a little bit of everything. If their mule skinner was off, I took his place.
What level did you work as a miner?
Well, I was started on 86 in the Central Mine, and they had 40 level, and then I moved me up to 40 level. I worked there until I left the mine. They had contracts there, so much a foot, your shafts and drifts and crosscuts and raises was all so much a foot. They'd let you make about $10 a day, and if you make over that, they'd holler at you to shut it down.
That was pretty good wages back then. Orlo, would you mind sitting back over here and maybe you could prompt Mr. Phelan and
Your wages in we're talking what, 1939, 1940? Is that the years that you were at the North Star?
Yeah, went to mines in 1937.
Okay.
5 1/4 a day for a mucker, $5.76 for a miner, $6 for timberman.
And Hoistman, I think, was one of the highest paid.
Yeah, Hoistman. I really don't know what the Hoistman made.
Yes.
I went home, I tried out for it, and it was too nerve-wracking for me. I did one up there one day. I said, okay, I'm going back underground.
Do you remember So when you worked in the North Star, you rode the cages down, is that right?
No, you went down on the cage, right.
The cage.
Right. Uh-huh.
And in the vertical shaft, which I
Yeah.
think went down about 4,000, and then you took another
3,600.
3,600, and then you had to go down another.
Yeah, we walked about, a half a mile and down number 5 winds from 88, 89, and so on down.
So you were down at the 86.
86.
How rich was the ore?
Well, it was good mill ore, but there wasn't high grade in that lower country. In
$2 or $3 a ton? Is that maybe?
I imagine. But up on the 40 level, they hit a lot of pockets of gold, you know.
Yes. And what were the temperatures like down at the 86?
I don't remember just what the temperature was, but it was the humidity what got you. The temperature wasn't that bad, but
So you didn't get any good cross ventilation or
yeah,
or much air probably going down through there.
they do. Sink a shaft every 200 feet. They'd get on the ledge and fall to the end of the ledge, and then put a raise from that level up to the next level, give the circulation of it.
How many shifts were they working at the North Star when you?
2, that day shift and night shift.
Right. And then keep a third with pumpmen and everybody.
Yeah,
if you-
yeah.
They would keep
pumping,
around the clock
yeah.
back in there. Do you remember some of the personalities? For example, Mr. Sonny Foote, I guess, was still the chief engineer, wasn't he? Mr. Foote,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I believe he was still active at that time, and I think was the manager of that mine.
Yeah.
And any others?
Charlie Newlove, he had something here up in the top of the mountain.
Do you remember any of your shift bosses?
Oh, Frank Jolly, Jack Payton, Louis Valdez, Tommy Thompson was our foreman. I can't think of just the ones that I worked, with. There's a I can't think of it.
Do you-
Jack Fields.
Jack Fields. Do you recall on payday how you were paid? Were you paid by check?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I got some of my check stubs home.
You still have your check stubs. They used to, when Newmont had this mine, they would send a wire back to New York, where the corporate headquarters were, and New York would wire the money into the Bank of America to be able to do it downtown in order to do the payroll. That's Barbara Jarvis has done some study on some of that. That's how they used to do it.
They finally got so they'd banks to stay open until after the guys got their checks, so they could cash their checks. Outside of that, you had to go to there's a place out here at Hills Flat called Tix.
Oh, I remember Tiggs.
Tix.
Yes,
He always had quite a bit of money. He cashed a lot of checks.
yes,
He sold a lot of liquor away.
right.
He was,
Where were you living then, Mr. Phelan? What part of Grass Valley?
well, we lived on Pine Street, Grass Valley, and
So you could walk, well, no, that was a long walk over to the North Star,
Yeah.
but you could have walked him to the Empire very closely then.
right.
And did you walk or did you have a car?
I had a car.
What kind of car did you have?
I had a 40 Chevy, but then I had an old Dodge pickup.
And you worked the day shift?
You every change every week. 1 week a day, 1 week a night.
I see.
I hated that. You just about get used to it and you're a change,
Could you just kind of describe a routine day? In other words, from the time you got up in the morning, what time you got to work, and when you drove, and what time did you get to the mine and go into the dry, and I presume you kept all your clothes in the dry, and just kind of
Yeah.
describe your day.
Yeah. Well, yeah. They blew the whistles here. 5 o'clock they blew a whistle. And 6 o'clock they blew a whistle. And until the next time you went underground, And you'd catch a skip and go down and walk into where your place of work was.
How long did it take you to get to the face that you were working at?
About 30 minutes.
But fortunately, you were on the clock, right? You were on the clock once you started underground.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but you know, it wasn't, you were 8 hours down there. It wasn't from when you first went down, you know.
Right. So you were mining. You were a miner at the time. You had, I presume, some type of pneumatic drill that you were working with every day.
Yeah, the old no lug steel. The rotator steel is what it was, you know.
Right.
You got to hold stuff. They had a bar about that long to fit that steel. The steel was square. You put it on there and twist and twist and twist, try to get it out. Another way we'd take a piece of steel and stand it up, and we'd drive that down that steel. Sometimes it would pull it, but.
And during a shift, about how many you would generally be going in? About 4 feet, I think.
In a drift, about
Yeah.
4 foot.
About 4 foot. And how many holes were you expected to drill in a shift?
It all depends on your ground. You can drill from 12 to 14 holes in a drift. Cross cut, you would put a burn cut. So you'd have a burn cut of 5 holes, and you shoot every one but the center hole, and then you broke through that, you know. But the only place was in the cross cuts, you know. In a drift, it's pretty soft. You put an up cut, put your machine down. If it was harder, you'd drill a down cut and pull it. And if it got a little tougher than that, you run the easier right over the top of your cut holes and your lifters for an easier.
Right. So you would usually blast going off shift?
Yes.
And while you were drilling there, I suppose you had a mucker or a couple of muckers
Yeah.
who were
Stay with you.
picking up whatever you had
Yeah.
blasted the day before.
Yeah, I almost got blasted. We had this big stope, and there was 3 machines, and I was the last one out next to the number 5 winds. Well, they'd holler at me, and I'd start lighting. When I got half of my round lit, I'd holler, and the center guy'd start lighting. I'd be over by the time he finished. Then we'd let the end man and the raise would blast. So the middle man hollered at me, "Hey Jack, have you started lighting yet?" I said, "Nobody hollered. The kid that was with me wouldn't stay with him, you know." So I didn't want to go that way, but I dropped down and they were running the intermediate. But the intermediate was right where the raise went up there. The intermediate was in there maybe 20, 30 foot. I thought about that intermediate, so I went up the ladder, and every time one of them holes would go off and knock your light up. So I just hung on to that old slippery ladder till all those holes went. I come off the top, there were about 10 or 15 guys there. They said, "Boy, we're glad to see you."
You mentioned, and you might just be able to understand what a stope was. For example, a drift was kind of a straight tunnel sort of thing, tall enough usually to get a mule through it. But now, describe a raise. What was a raise?
Well, like I say, it went from one level to the next level for the ore round, and they'd put in a chute down on there, and then they'd start running the raise up, and they have a chute right there to put the ore in.
And then what was a stope?
Yeah, that was the stope. It was a lot of time to call.
Kind of opening out, right?
Yeah, the same as
Did they leave pillars in to kind of hold that ground also?
Yeah, just a single pillar, you know, with a head frame and you know, they'd have a head over about that long, and it was cut to a V, and then the other one shaped to fit that V. Then they put it, and then they'd drive it down tight. One morning, I used to working for this Phelan, a real nice guy, and this had a stellar in this big chunk of rock. It was half in here, you know. They had a stellar. Well, every morning Frank would try that because he was scared it might break off. Well, they sent me to do another stope the next morning. Then another guy, and Frank didn't check that. He grabbed that timber and swung around, killed him, broke off and killed him.
About how high was the quartz ledge that you were following?
Well, some of them was 6 foot ledge in the main part of the mine. But old North Star, I worked one stope, and it was a big kidney of quartz and gold. It was a lot of gold. They went in there and hit this stringer right at the top of the drifter, So they went up and then, instead of taking all of that other ore underneath that, they went up there and drifted, and the ledge is only about so big, but I used to knock the end out of a powder box and sit on the foot wall, and my hang and my hat would hit the top. Then you take and you dig a ditch with it in there, and they had these little cars that hold about 1,000 pounds end dump, and they'd have a chute out there at the end of this. And everybody had to take a week in there. They call it the $1 million stope.
Mm-hmm.
Now the gold prices today, it would have been something else.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. In South Africa, for example, the mines are over 2 miles deep now, and they're still finding gold. So it's.
They had a thing in that mine that scared everybody. They never knew what caused it, but it just sounded like about a ton of powder went off someplace. That old mine would go whoa, 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 and timbers start popping and cracking. It made you think, I'll tell you.
Do you remember rats in the mine?
Yeah, we used to feed the rats down there. They'd come lunchtime, the peeps that some of them this long and all come up, we used to throw them scraps.
They used to kind of keep the mine clean, actually,
Yeah.
pretty well.
Yeah.
And never happened. They always said if the rats are leaving, look out, because there's going to be some. That ground was. How stable was the rock you were in?
Most of it was pretty good. Most of it, you barred down though. You had to.
You had to test it all the time, didn't you?
I was thinking of shaft one time. I had 3 brothers, and all 4 of us worked at that mine. So, shift boss came down there, and did you bar down the spec? No, he didn't. So I always barred down. I wasn't working underneath that. He said, if Jack gets hurt, and you throw 3 boys go to sea, but well, let's shut the mine down.
Were you working at the time of December 7th, 1941? Were you working in the mine then?
41, no.
I mean, on Pearl Harbor Day?
41.
On Pearl Harbor Day?
Yeah, I was in came out of the mines in 43.
Mm-hmm. And so you were working here then in October 1942 when they said they had to shut down. Were you working at the lava cap then?
Yeah, I went to lava cap. Several of us went to lava cap. And that was something else. I never put in a square set in my life when it was all square set,
Why was the lava cap? Was it a less desirable place to work, or?
Yeah, it was.
Because of the management, or just the ground was different, or?
Like all your tracks, if you wanted to, push a car off the tracks, this stuff would shuffle off the side and come on those tracks. So half the time you have to clean the track before you could push a car out of it.
Uh-huh.
And when you come up at night washing, you know how your hands are, like when you're picking tomatoes? Well, that's the way it was. They would all turn green.
Hmm.
But they had their best dries around here. You took your diggers off, and they had a pulley. You pull them up high, and then you brought your street clothes down first, and sent your diggers up.
Right.
They were always dry. I've been over there at the central mine on them. Half the time in the morning, your clothes would be half damp. They would dry out.
By the way, the expression "dry" is precisely that. It was to dry. It was a place where the miners changed.
Yeah.
And they went in the morning and took off the street clothes, and then got their diggers on, and you kept your hard hat there and your boots and lamps and everything else. And
yeah, they had electric light. I like that electric light.
Did you use electric lights?
Yeah.
But didn't you have wear that big battery?
Battery on your belt.
Yeah, the battery always kind of got in the way of a mucker, right?
Yeah.
So
Like starting a hole, you could put it on the spot and you could see right there the carbide. You didn't know where you were drilling, but I like that.
Let me ask you, since a miner, I kind of remember that drill. There's lots of noise when you're starting into that.
Yeah.
Did you wear any ear protection?
No, we never had any. That's, I think, from my hearing, that time getting almost blasted, I think that
Right.
messed up my hearing.
Nor any eye protection, I don't.
No, well, they had eye protection, but half the guys didn't wear them, you know. My brother would drive and worked in the mill, and they had these tappets. They drove in tappet keep on the big pushers, you know, changing them, and no glass, and chip flew off and went right in his eye, put his eye out.
What sort of protective ways did you keep from getting silicosis? Did you do anything that was?
They got the wet machines, you know. It used to be all dry machines, and that wouldn't happen. But you gotta try. I call it the whole wet and everything. I never did.
Yeah, that technology, we're told here, was really developed by, and I can't think of his name right now, I will, but who was the superintendent here of the mine for a good many years, whose house was right up here.
George Starr.
Yes, George Starr was the one who developed putting that hole through that bit
Oh, yeah.
so that you would do it. But when they first started in the 1880s or 1870s with those pneumatic drills, it was dust all the way,
Right,
and that
right.
miner right alongside of it ingesting that
Yeah,
dust
yeah.
all the time. But he put the water so that it became kind of a paste, was it
Yeah.
not? As the drill went in, it was really a paste. Pasty water would actually come out.
Yeah. I had a contract one time. They were sinking a shaft, and they would in a drift, and they had muck the drift on night shift. They'd muck the shaft on day shift. So I'd go in there. I'd go down at 3:30. I'd get in there about 4 o'clock, and I'd take the first skip to get there. I'd open the air wide open and put the water hose over the end of it, and I'd blow that thing.
Yes.
I was only in there about a month, and they shut the shaft down, and I straight day shift.
So one of the protective measures you took was always wet everything down, the muck pile and everything
Keep
else.
Keep it wet.
And because that was also, you would, remember the night, you could smell all the nitroglycerin from the dynamite,
Yeah.
and that'd give you a headache if you didn't wet that down also.
You know, the night shift loading, Monday night I'd have a headache. No matter what I did, I'd have a headache. And we wore gloves every rest of the week. Fine.
That,
Funniest thing I've seen in the mine is they'd shut down some workings, and on by that they were still working, but they had a 2-inch nipple stand about that high, you know. And this guy told him 5 cars is all you could hold going out there, and you know, 6 all you had was to run a piece of steel in between the wheels and lay down on it, you know. I says, you can't hold that, you're going to have a problem. Oh, don't worry about it. Okay. Come out there, and the mule got to trotting, trying to keep away from them cars. That single tree flipped up and went down on that nipple. And it pulled that mule back in. His backbone was just like that. There's about this much water running out the drift, and Angelo was on him. He horned, Jack, quick, the mule. So I run around there. I says, unbuckle a hame strap. I can't do it. I says, cut it. He stood right in front of that mule and cut that. It knocked him here to you backwards in that water. Every time I'd see him downtown, Jack, you remember the mule? I said, yeah, I remember the mule.
about how many mules did they have at the North Star? Do you recall?
There was only 2. Central, I think they had about either 3 or 4.
At the height, I think at the Empire they had about 44, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my brother's job. He was a welder in a monkey winch gang. He did everything with the crew, you know. And that was his job. The mule had to come out. He was the one that had to go down and bring him up. One time the old North Star was a boot, you know, and I told foreman, said, you stay on top. He says, well, your brother's coming over. You're going to take a mule down, okay. So about that mule, he was pretty excited. I don't know what all about, but anyhow, we'd throw this big canvas thing over that mule. We'd have a ring at each corner of that. We'd pull that into the middle of him, and then pull him tight together, and then pick him up with a tugger and swing him around and drop him in that. In that down the shaft would go, and I was the first. I had him a halter, and I was the first one right next to him. As the guy was trying to get a hold of me, I just looked around. That old mouth was going. When we took him down, and there's a false track You put it in when they're coming down the main shaft, they'd run it right out on the station. So we ran him out on the station, and the mule was just quivering. He was, we got him all undressed, and the two mule skinners was there. And the one said, "This is your mule." The other one said, "No, it's your mule." "Well, you're on 30, it's your mule." I said, "Somebody better take this mule before he goes down the shaft." So I just took him in the mule barn and tied him up, and they worked it out.
When you were at the lava cap, you mentioned having to clear the tracks. Were they moving cars manually? Is that like in the old days,
No, they had
transporting, or did they have electric trains?
They had electric train down on there, but in the slopes where you had to use the track,
Right. And probably, what was your best experiences that you remember? I mean, what?
I don't know. The funniest one, they told me to skin the mule. They just punched a hole, long enough for that mule, and they put up posts here and nailed some boards, but he couldn't go forward. Nailed on it in. I went down there and I got out, and you had a pin to drop in the front of that car. Well, it had about 3 foot of chain. I missed that. Away went that mule. I fought him clear of the end of the drift. And at a good crooked, I knocked my light out, and he'd fall down and finally get up. Finally, I got ahead of him, brought him back, and Harder Seymour was the boss. And boy, you got dare hurt one of those mules, and he was pretty well skinned up. I didn't think about that. He said, "What did you do to that mule? Did you use a starter on him?" Which is a short starter steel. I said, "If I had got ahead of him, I'd have used it." But anyhow, I didn't put that up, and coming out with 5 cars. Well, the mule went into the mule barn, and 3 of those cars just went back.
Fell over, did they? I mean, they go over.
Yeah.
What miners frequently? I mean, there was always lots of joking going on before they went underground,
right.
and then they would play games or jokes on one another. Can you remember any of the things that?
Yeah, I was in a drift, and they were driving a raise, and this young guy was in a raise, and drilling, and the hose was too short. He had to put some pipe on. So he said, Peterson was a young guy. He says, "Go down there and get that hose stretcher." So Peterson come in there, and he says, I thought he said hole stretcher. He said, "No, hose stretcher, you damn fool."
He was a new man on the job, was he?
Yeah, he'd been there quite a while. But he just, One time they had a little underhand stoper on the drift. They were drifting down on it. And Peterson and Cliff Young was the miner. He said, "Boy, I'm cold." Well, Peterson went out there and got a couple of powder boxes and was built a fire. What was his name? Anyhow, I don't know what nationality was, but he broke, and he came running, Jung, get out, the mine's on fire." So Peterson kicked it off that water. Well, that was the worst thing in the world, because it made that much smoke. So my shift boss come down that morning. He said, "Peterson, no more fires on this."
The Empire one time had a very strong Cornish tradition, but as I look at it, the North Star, you had a very strong Irish. Do you remember?
Oh yeah.
A number of Irish.
Oh.
And others. I don't know if you remember that or not, but even from the early days, I mean, they used to call it the French lead, and they had some French and other nationalities, and then Irish, and then that's particularly over on that side of town, and why the Catholic Church was kind of the center of life over there.
They tell me Boss Ravine was a rough spot in this town years back.
Well, what today is a what's the Swiss restaurant, I think, was in operation in those days. That was a tavern that was there.
Uh-huh.
And then I think a bordello upstairs or something like that in Boston. What was the social life like in Grass Valley? And
Well, there But Bar Meadows was
Was that a favorite?
that was favorite had dance hall out in Bar Meadows. So
Saturday night?
Saturday night, yeah. We used to go to it Saturday night.
You took Mrs. Phelan dancing
Yeah.
in your...
Yeah, you knew a lot of people, you know. Years back, all of these little towns here, they had to dance with pretty often. We, Forest City and Allegheny, and Camptonville, San Juan.
How about Lake Olympia? Was that...
Lake Olympia, I really liked that out there, you know. It's out in the middle of the lake, the
Yes.
music. You get out of that car and hear that music over that water, you want to dance right there.
And later on, they used to have some name bands come up.
I'll tell you, good one. There were 3 couples of us going out that walkway, and Roy
So you were talking about Lake Olympia, where the pavilion was out over the lake, and you walked on a causeway
there was a
over.
little
Yes.
island out there. Anyhow, Roy Toms was in with a couple first, then Alec Ostrom, and they were big boys, like you know. I don't know what that guy said to Roy's girlfriend. He hit off and busted him, and he went right over into the lake, and he wasn't coming up. I said, that guy's going to drown. Let him drown. Well, that time we kicked him up and he had a suit on. He went waiting for the bank.
Yeah. So Saturday night was kind of a lively town, I guess.
Yeah.
Plenty of... Were you raised here, Mr. Phelan?
Yeah, born in Nevada City.
Born in Nevada City.
You know where Tylerfoot Road is?
Yes.
My grandfather's homestead on Tylerfoot Road, the early 1850s.
Was he a prospector also?
Yeah.
Did he have a claim up in there?
They had him and his uncle had several claims around out in that area, you know, but he never did mount to anything.
Was your dad a miner?
No, he was just a farmer. He worked in hydraulic mines years ago. He worked in hydraulic mines. In the hydraulic mines years ago, they used to have a square block to help break up the clay, you know, and he made them by hand. They'd hew them out and cut them up. He made pretty good money at that, I guess.
Was he up at the Malakoff?
Malakoff, yeah. And then in the summertime, he used to run a pedal wagon into Lake City and Broomfield and all that, Allegheny, all up there.
Well, then, did you start school in Washington? Is that where you...
Cherokee.
In Cherokee.
Yeah.
And then eventually moved into Nevada City.
Yeah, I moved to Nevada City. I went to work in mines. There was 13 of us kids, so I was the last boy, so I couldn't take care of my mother and dad out there on that place, and my youngest sister, so I come to work in the mines. And Dad,
How old were you when you came to work in the mine?
19.
19.
Mm-hmm.
And had you met Mrs. Phelan then?
Oh, I knew her since she was this high.
Did you go to high school together?
No, I missed high school. I had to take care of my folks. I had to stay home and try to make a living on the old ranch, milking cows and whatever, you know. So we brought him into town here. Dad finally sold the old place, but you couldn't take care of it out there, and I hated him to sell it too. He had about 2 homesteads, 160 acres to each homestead, and he had the best place out there. He had a water right to each place out of Shady Creek, about 20 inches of water for each ditch, so he raised a lot of stuff. Well,
What year were you born?
17.
So you really went right in the heart of the Depression.
Yeah. Yeah.
You had mentioned that you were working for the WPA at one time
Yeah, right.
in Nevada City.
Yeah, well, it was over there with every place we worked the ranch. They cleared a lot of old roads you wouldn't believe that nobody ever used, and it was just throwing money away, but put the people to work. And we cleared a lot of PG&E lines too,
Yes.
and stuff like that. And they'd have here in Nevada City, they'd have a project going over here maybe for a week. I forget, we only got to work about 3 days a week. That was your allotted, I think.
Well, that's what built Pioneer Park.
Yeah.
Also was all a
Yeah.
WPA project, putting the pool in and all of
Yeah.
that. And I walked with Steve Cottrell not too long ago, who was the mayor, who was taking us around. He was showing Mr. Gage McKinney some of the WPA projects, and you can still see the Blue Eagle on the curbs of some
Oh,
of
yeah.
those things that perhaps you worked in.
We built a camp up out of Cumbie Hill for these older people, you know, there in the summertime. And it was a funny thing. We went up there and there was a little orchard there. Well, we didn't know. Nobody showed up, and so we started pruning them out. The trees. They showed up, and those old guys that were always in a row. A couple of them was always in a row someplace over a building. They'd be separating these old guys.
So the first time you wrestled for a job in the mine was, how old were you then? 19, did you say?
Yeah, 19. Well, there's a story goes with that too. 3 of my brothers was working there, and there was about.
This is the North Star now?
So, yeah.
North Star.
And there was probably 15, 18, 20 guys every morning. So my brother asked Tommy Thompson if he'd give me a job. He said, yeah. Bring him out and point him out. So I went out the next morning. He knew who I was, and he hired me. The guy said, how in the hell did you get a job out here? Well, I've been wrestling here now for 2 months.
Right.
I said, how do I know?
And you were what age? How old were you then? 19?
19.
19.
Well, I weighed about 135 pounds.
So that was 1936 or thereabouts.
Yeah.
And tell us, how did you get your boots, hard hat, and all of that? And
They had, the company had them and took them out of your check. This guy I worked with,
so you went underground that day that he picked you out. Is that right?
you know, I come the next morning.
Came the next morning. Did you have to go get a physical from a doctor?
Yeah, old Doc Jones.
Doc Jones.
Yeah. He was a great. He had more money out than, you know. A lot of people wouldn't pay him. He didn't make any difference to me. He never tried to get the money for him. He was quite a guy.
And so, what advice did your brother give you before you first started underground? What did he tell you?
He didn't tell me
Anything?
No.
Did anybody tell you anything on your first day?
But I lucked out. They put me with a guy I'd known for years, Tony Hudson. Took me down, and him and I mucked together that day.
How'd you like mucking?
What's that?
How did you like being a mucker?
Yeah.
How long were you a mucker before
Oh,
you
I don't
kind of
know.
moved up to become a
Probably
miner?
about a year.
About a year?
I wanted a contractor. No, I didn't want to go on a machine. Too. So
Could you describe what a mucker does?
what's that?
Could you describe what a mucker does?
For the ore, you know, you put that with a shovel and you throw it in this here, and then you run it out to the main shaft, and dump it down the chute. And every place had a chute for it.
But the mucker as we used to
Yeah.
say, he mucks the muck. But he's doing the shoveling into the car.
They had the regular mule car back then, the one they call a tub, but the tub was a round bottom like this. But you could put about 500 pounds more in that when I was contracting. I don't want no more mule cars, I want all tubs. They used to have round in and round out too. You went down and you mucked back and you rigged up and drilled and blasted. Night shift come down, they'd muck it back and rig up and dry and blast. Round in and round out, they call it.
Yeah. So you still have the gases had not really settled by that time.
Yeah.
Like overnight sometimes. I mean,
Yeah. I laughed. This old miner, they had a spot that was pretty wet, and they could give them electric primers. So I come to work in the morning, and Tommy Thompson said, "Hey Jack, Joe Pierce couldn't get his round to go down there. The first time he ever used electric primers. Well, super old guy, he cut those wires off like he would if he was cutting the fuses off to make whichever holes you want to go, you know. And well, there wasn't enough power in that old plunger we had without scraping the wires. So I scraped all the wires off and get the plunger and boom, shut it off. Joe come down. How did you start that round last night? How did you start that round? I said, Joe, you don't have to cut those wires. Take that bare end of those and put them together.
so you were using a plunger,
Yeah.
an electric,
Yeah,
not a non-electric or a fuse, you didn't use that.
yeah. This guy was miner, he'd get on a little plunger and he'd keep it going till the hole started going. We had a tester too, we used to test those fuses to see if they're right. And he didn't want to do that. I said, I'm going to do it. I don't rather have to do that, come down here and find a missed hole. And we had a missed hole one time, and went to put the fuses in. He mashed the end of that with a pick, and it didn't go.
Lucky.
You get a missed hole, you got to get the water and wash them out and get that out of there. And
What was your worst day underground? Do you remember?
yeah, after Cherry Carnival in North San Juan.
You'd gone up North San Juan? That was their Allegheny always had a carnival in North San Juan. So that was you were up there for the weekend, and then what was it? Monday morning was your worst day.
Boy, my head was about this big. And sometimes if they're getting short of ore in the mill, they take all these gyppos and put them up in the stopes and get more ore out, you know. So I was contracting and drifting. Boy, I went in and went down and almost out my head. Somebody said, "You look like death warmed over." I says, "I feel like it too." You know?
When you say you were contracting, were you in a leaser? Were you a leaser? What we used to call leasers?
So they've got leasers down too. I forget how they did the company pounded first the powder out of one all, and they split the take. You know, those leasers made some good money.
Yes,
they made good money. One of them there on 44 level, they had a raise going up here and a drift going in here. Well, if Hayward Dutton was one of the leasers, he had this piece of ground start to start, and you can see gold right there in the face. So what that company is thinking about, I don't know. He had a round drilled, and they seen that, and the shift boss called the top. They shut old Dutton down and took that away from him. I blasted it around. Well, that was a pile of gold in there too. The old foreman Tommy, he'd say, "Don't you start mucking like him down. You pick that water hose," and boy, there was gold you wouldn't believe.
Yeah, you could just take your lamp right alongside of that and just sparkle of it.
A joker down there one time, they had some big wigs coming out here from back east, and they just, it's in the drift I was in where this gold was, and along the ledge you could see chunks of gold there, you know. Here come old Cliff Young with a moil and a single jack knocking that out. "You goofy," I said, "you're going to get me fired." Oh, he says after one blast. Well, it wasn't after one blast, it's all covered over, you know. Yeah, but I said, what about before that first blast? The old timers, that's high grade, and they figured that there were retirement money.
Used to call that family rock, right?
Yeah. One old guy, anyhow, rock he had, but the old North Star, he had chunks about this big, and it would get a speck of gold in it. And this stupid guy come up and he set the bucket down. It was hot in those old dries, you know, so the night foreman, he'd sit there right waiting for the guys to change and go home and the other go down, you know. Set the bucket right there where he sat down. He picks that bucket up, and what do you know? So they took him over to the other mine where all the offices were, over to Central. Says, where do you get rid of this stuff? He says, "I don't know. This is the first I ever brought out." Some of these guys had these old little barrel crushers, you know, with ball in it, electric motor on it. You could hear that thing grinding.
Yes, Bill Galino, or not Bill Galino, but one of the Galinos.
Frank.
It wasn't Frank. I think it was Bill.
So it was the Bill.
And I think he used to deliver milk from the Galino dairy, you know, through Grass Valley and by horse, I think, and everything. But he said you could hear those grinders down in the basements going all hours of night.
I had a friend that was a plumber. They called him at his house, and he pulled the trap off underneath, and it was full of gold. Pan it out in the bathtub, you know. I like the mine, no, you sweat in the lower levels, a lot of time contracting, noon time I take my boots off and wring the sweat out of my socks, you know.
Yes.
But you have to come up and take a shower and you felt good. What I like
Did
about-
you have to leave your lunch bucket at the collar of the shaft?
No,
for inspection?
Idaho, Maryland, you did. You had 2 dries. You took your street clothes off right here, and there's a guard stood there as you walked down the hallway and put your diggers on.
Here at the Empire, we had one room with the lockers in the dry, which we'd take off our clothes and walk naked across a shower room, and then that's where we had another locker room where we had our diggers, put that on, and then we would just reverse the process. We had to take a shower right there in front of the shift boss. And then,
Oh, yeah.
But we always left our lunch buckets right at the collar of the shaft, because they could inspect them.
But Central wasn't that way. They had when you had your diggers there, they took your diggers down and hung your street clothes up there in the place where the diggers were. There was nobody watching at all. They're a good bunch of guys underground, though. If you need a hand, they're right there to help you. Yeah.
But they loved to play jokes on one another. I
Yeah.
remember when I was fairly new, my miner, they sent me after a chuck tender. And the chuck tender is on the machine. There's a big nut that he adjusts and everything else, and that's called the chuck. And the miner's really a chuck tender. But I remember, I guess I had done it early, but he sent me up at one level, or down to the 54. There was a lease going on at the 5400 level. And I had to go down to the leaser and ask him for a chuck tender, and they said, no, I don't have one, but maybe you go up, He sent me another part of the mine, and I looked for it there. Anyway, they didn't get much work out of me that day.
I have what they had over there too. They'd have this carbide, and in that skip you was three. There was in that, and they'd get a piece of carbide and raise up and drop it down your boot and got down there. Damn boy, you was putting their foot everywhere.
Get hot.
Already.
Yeah. Because if you were coming off shift, you always used to throw the carbide into a pool of water and it would just go poof, just blow up. Kind of fun. Yeah.
Another time with this mule was the guy, he had more trouble with that on 30 level, and there's a big chute there, several places coming down. The operation was coming down at one chute. He got to fighting that mule under that chute, and the mule got to kick and kicked the door open on that and dumped about 6 cars on the ground. He had to muck up.
But you had to keep your wits about you. I mean, you had to concentrate on what you were doing when you were underground. You agree with that?
Yeah, right.
I mean, you had to test the rock. You had to watch where your foot go. I mean, if you didn't concentrate, you did.
Yeah.
You got injured and sometimes killed. I mean, you could fall down through a chute or whatever, and you had to really think about what you were doing. I mean, when your light went out, I mean, that was black. I mean,
Right. It was a dark spot, I'll tell you.
And so, and it took a few minutes and get your light going again.
The mine hate to pay this compensation too. Frank Brigadier, I've known for a long time. What did they do? I think he broke his leg. They brought him back to work and put him on a timber truck and pushed him back while the worker was working someplace and leave him till it put time to go get him.
Were you required to join the Miners Protective
No,
League?
he didn't have to. I call it the Mine Owners Protective League.
Do you remember then when the CIO and
Yeah.
tried to organize the mines up here, the Murchie Mine particularly,
Murchie Mine, that's where
in
they-
1937, which was a Newmont property in Nevada City, was the old
Yeah.
Murchie Mine. But when they tried to organize up here, and they ended up running them out of town, I think.
Yeah, up there, the Merchant where they had the biggest battle.
Yes. I mean, they were at it with axe handles.
Yeah. They call this Union paper we got here the Morning Onion.
Yep. Yeah, that was. But the mine, the Protection League was not too much of I mean, it was just a local group that had grown out
Yeah.
of the 1869 strike, and
The old timers told me, a couple of them, that they wanted more money, you know. And the mine owner said, we'll see the cows drinking out of the collar of the shaft before you get any more money back to work.
Well, I guess we could wrap this up. Thank you.
well, thank you very much for sharing
Oh,
those memories
I'm
with us.
glad.
Yeah.